Hello, welcome to this channel. Today we will learn about a dangerous situation unfolding in Salem that threatens to expose dark secrets from the past and put several beloved characters in serious jeopardy. Chad DiMera finds himself trapped in a terrifying blackmail scheme after publishing an innocent book review, and the identity of the blackmailer could spell disaster for everyone involved. The return of a dangerous criminal. Salem residents have been on edge ever since Jeremy Horton made his shocking return to town, claiming to be a reformed man with a fresh perspective on life. However, those who know his history have every reason to be skeptical of this supposed transformation. Jeremy's criminal resume reads like a nightmare, filled with activities that destroyed lives and shattered families across multiple states. His involvement in elaborate financial fraud schemes demonstrated a calculated cruelty that went beyond simple greed. Jeremy orchestrated dubious investment opportunities that drained innocent victims of their life savings, leaving devastation in his wake. But his crimes escalated far beyond white-collar offenses into truly horrifying territory. He participated in an international human trafficking ring, specifically targeting vulnerable women from England and forcing them into prostitution. This operation revealed the depth of his depravity and his complete lack of moral conscience. The emotional and physical trauma he inflicted on countless victims remains incalculable, and the fact that he managed to evade serious prison time for these offenses continues to haunt those who remember his reign of terror. A history of violence and abuse. Perhaps most disturbing was Jeremy's pattern of abusive behavior toward those closest to him, particularly Stephanie Johnson. Their relationship was marked by control, manipulation, and escalating violence that reached a horrifying climax one fateful evening. During what should have been a relaxing moment together, Jeremy's temper exploded over something Stephanie said or did that displeased him. In a fit of rage, he grabbed her by the head and forcibly held her underwater in a hot tub, nearly drowning her as she struggled desperately for air. The psychological scars from that near-death experience continue to haunt Stephanie to this day, manifesting in anxiety and fear whenever Jeremy's name is mentioned. She can still feel the burning sensation in her lungs, the panic of being unable to breathe, and the terrifying realization that someone she cared about wanted to harm her. After that incident, Jeremy attempted to cover his tracks by professing his love and devotion, using classic abuser tactics to manipulate her emotions and make her question her own judgment. This gaslighting added another layer of trauma that Stephanie has worked hard to overcome through therapy and support from loved ones. When the walls began closing in on him and law enforcement started connecting the dots between his various criminal enterprises, Jeremy made the calculated decision to flee Salem rather than face justice. He abandoned his life in town, leaving behind victims who never received closure or compensation for the harm he caused. His departure brought a collective sigh of relief to those who knew him, with many hoping he would never return. An unwelcome homecoming. Now Jeremy has resurfaced in Salem, brazenly claiming that his time away has transformed him into a better person who has left his criminal past behind. He insists that he's learned from his mistakes, found redemption, and deserves a second chance to rebuild his life in the community he once terrorized. But can a leopard truly change its spots? Can someone with such a deeply ingrained pattern of manipulation, abuse, and criminal behavior genuinely reform? His arrival sent shockwaves through Stephanie's world when he appeared unexpectedly at her apartment door. She opened the door to find the man who nearly killed her standing there with what he probably thought was a charming smile, ready to convince her of his supposed rehabilitation. Jeremy launched into a well-rehearsed speech about personal growth and transformation, claiming he was no longer the man who committed those terrible acts. He spoke with practiced sincerity about therapy, self-reflection, and making amends. But Stephanie wasn't buying any of it. Her instincts screamed danger, and her body's physical response to his presence, increased heart rate, shallow breathing, trembling hands, reminded her that trauma doesn't simply disappear because someone claims they've changed. She recognized the same manipulative patterns in his words, the same attempts to control the narrative and rewrite history that he'd used on her before. The secret that could destroy everything. Stephanie's fear extends far beyond her own safety. She harbors a secret that could prove catastrophic if Jeremy discovers it. She is the author of a recently published romance novel titled One Stormy Night under the pseudonym Anastasia Sands. The book contains a character obviously based on Jeremy, with thinly veiled references to his criminal activities and abusive behavior. The character in her novel engages in illegal activities that mirror Jeremy's real-life crimes with uncanny accuracy. She drew heavily from her traumatic experiences to create an authentic antagonist, never imagining that Jeremy would return to Salem and potentially recognize himself in the pages. If he realizes that she's the author and identifies himself as the villain in her story, there's no telling how he might react. Will he explode in rage? Will he seek revenge? Will he threaten legal action or something far worse? These questions keep Stephanie awake at night, playing out worst-case scenarios in her mind. She fears not only for herself but for everyone she loves. Jeremy's obsessive fixation on her never truly ended, and she worries constantly that his claim of being reformed is nothing more than an elaborate scheme to get close to her again. A troubling new development. The situation became even more concerning when Stephanie learned that Jeremy had secured a position as a long-term substitute teacher at Salem Elementary, where he would be teaching Thomas D. Mara's class. The thought of this violent criminal working with vulnerable children, particularly the son of her former romantic partner Chad D. Mara, fills her with dread. Thomas is an innocent child who deserves to be in a safe learning environment, not under the supervision of someone with Jeremy's dangerous history. Stephanie finds herself caught in an impossible dilemma. Every protective instinct tells her to warn Chad about the potential threat teaching his son, to expose Jeremy's true nature before he can harm anyone else. She has detailed knowledge of Jeremy's criminal record and violent tendencies that Chad deserves to know. However, revealing what she knows could backfire spectacularly. If she exposes Jeremy's past, she risks him discovering that she wrote about him in her book, which could trigger the very violence she's trying to prevent. She hasn't even been completely honest with her current boyfriend, Alex Kyriakis, about the full extent of Jeremy's crimes and what he did to her. Stephanie keeps certain details to herself, not wanting to burden Alex with the darkest chapters of her past. More importantly, she fears Alex's protective nature might lead him to confront Jeremy directly, which could escalate into a dangerous physical altercation. Alex has already made it clear that he would retaliate aggressively if Jeremy ever laid a hand on her again, demonstrating a fierce protectiveness that, while touching, could prove dangerous given Jeremy's unpredictable nature and history of violence. Chad's innocent mistake. Unaware of the complex web of secrets surrounding Stephanie and Jeremy, Chad D. Mara made a fateful decision in his capacity as a journalist and publisher. He wrote and published a comprehensive review of One Stormy Night, the novel authored by the mysterious Anastasia Sands. His review was thorough and professional, analyzing the book's themes, character development, and compelling storyline. In his critical analysis, Chad specifically quoted passages describing one particularly intriguing character, a man with a criminal past involving financial schemes and other dubious activities. The character was given a pseudonym in the book, just as the author had protected her own identity behind the pen name Anastasia Sands. Chad had no idea that he was writing about real people with real connections to his own life. He didn't know that Stephanie, someone he once loved and still cares about deeply, had written the book. He certainly didn't know that the character he was analyzing was based on Jeremy Horton, who was now teaching his son. The review was well written and fair, simply examining the literary merits of the work and highlighting particularly compelling sections. Chad believed he was fulfilling his professional duties as a journalist by bringing attention to an intriguing new novel. He had no reason to suspect that this routine book review would soon turn his life into a nightmare. The blackmail threat emerges. Shortly after publishing his review, Chad received a chilling anonymous message that made his blood run cold. Instead of pursuing legitimate legal channels like filing a defamation lawsuit or requesting a retraction through proper procedures, the mysterious sender chose a more sinister approach: blackmail. The message was coldly calculated and terrifyingly specific. The blackmailer demanded an enormous sum, $1 million in cash, to be placed in a bag and dropped at a predetermined location. The instructions were clear and threatening, leaving no room for negotiation or discussion. The message concluded with an ominous warning that if Chad failed to comply with these demands, he would pay dearly for his transgression. The vague nature of this threat made it all the more frightening, as Chad's imagination filled in the terrible possibilities. What form would this payment take if he refused to cooperate? Would the blackmailer target him personally? Would his children, Thomas and Charlotte, be put in danger? Would his business empire crumble under some orchestrated campaign of destruction? The lack of specificity in the threat made it impossible to prepare or protect against, leaving Chad in a state of anxious uncertainty. The question everyone is asking. The mystery of the blackmailer's identity has become the central question driving this entire storyline forward. Is Jeremy Horton reverting to his old criminal patterns, using threats and intimidation to punish those he believes have wronged him? Has he recognized himself in Stephanie's book despite the pseudonym, connected Chad to the review, and decided to extract revenge while simultaneously enriching himself? If Jeremy is indeed the blackmailer, his presence as Thomas's teacher takes on a horrifying new dimension. He would have easy access to Chad's son for hours each day, providing leverage for even more devastating threats. The thought of this violent criminal in close proximity to an innocent child creates an urgency that demands immediate action. However, there's another possibility that complicates the investigation. What if someone else entirely is behind this blackmail scheme? Salem has no shortage of people with axes to grind, hidden agendas, and criminal inclinations. Could another character have discovered the connection between the book and real events, seeing an opportunity for financial gain? Could someone be framing Jeremy to cover their own tracks? Could there be multiple people working together in a conspiracy that extends far beyond a simple book review? The answers to these questions will determine not only Chad's fate but potentially the safety of everyone connected to this increasingly dangerous situation. As Salem residents watch this drama unfold, one thing remains certain: secrets have a way of destroying everything in their path, and the truth, whatever it may be, is coming soon.